welcome back to the channel. Today my name is Osereme, and in this video I'll be sharing with you how to make this underbust corset that I'm putting on right now. In my last tutorial I shared the pattern drafting, so if you're interested in learning how to sew this, keep on watching and let's get started. So guys, like I said before, I drafted this pattern in my last tutorial. The link is going to be in my description box. So as you can see, I placed this pattern on my fabric and my fabric is in a fold, and I went ahead to mark my stitching allowance all the way around. For this center front here that I'm folding in, this area here, I added 1 inch stitching allowance instead of 0.75 because I'm going to be placing my busk in the center front. So now I'll go ahead and just cut along these lines that I have here. You can see straight through my life. So once you're done cutting everything out, it's going to look something like this. So these are all the patterns that we're going to be using to make this corset, and you can see all the stitching allowances are right here. And the only part where I gave it 1 inch stitching allowance was in the center front where we're going to be placing our busk. Also, I've gone ahead to use this pattern to cut out on my lining pieces, as you can see here. So now what I'm going to do is to iron my hairstay to all these pieces. So I'll be turning both the lining and the actual fabric. I'll be placing them. I'll be turning the back of the actual fabric, the back of the lining as well. And I'll go ahead and iron my hairstay to all the pieces. So guys, after I was done doing that, this is what I had. I made sure to place back all my pattern papers after I was done ironing it in place so that we don't have issues when we are trying to stitch this down. So now these right here are the three front pieces. Okay, I am removing the lining and the pattern paper for now and setting them aside. So I'm going to arrange it. This is the center front here. This is the side front one, and then this is the side front two here. Remember, there's going to be a busk at the middle of this corset, so this is going to divide the front piece into two like this. So I'll be leaving the box out first. Let's go ahead and join these sides. We're not going to be joining this center front together. We'll just join these other pieces except the center front because we need to place a box there later. So right now, we'll go ahead and pin these two pieces together like this, and then I'll add this other piece as well, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it down. So now when you've pinned down one side of the front piece, it's going to look something like this. Now we'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch this area down with the 0.75 inches that we gave as stitching allowance, and I'll do the same thing for the other pieces as well. So as you can see, when you are stitching on the sewing machine, you want to make sure that you are taking that 0.75 inches as you sew, just like you see me doing like this. If you don't do that, you are going to end up encountering a lot of issues later. So guys, this is what the front pieces looked like after I was done stitching them down. I've gone ahead to iron the seams open as well. So we'll be leaving these front pieces aside first. Now let's work on the back pieces. So for the back pieces, there are three pieces for each side as well. So this is the center back. This is the side back one. I will arrange them as well. And then this is the side back two. If you have not seen the pattern drafting tutorial for this, please you need to see it, else you will not understand what is actually going on here. Okay. So just like we did on the front pieces, we're going to pin these patterns together like this. This piece is actually just like you see me doing like this, and then you're going to open up to be sure that everything is okay. So I'll do the same thing for the other side as well, and go ahead and stitch this down with the 0.75 inches that we left. So guys, this is what I had after I was done stitching down the back pieces. Okay, if we turn it to the other side, you see that I ironed the stitching allowance in opposite directions like this. So this is another way you can iron your stitching allowance if you don't want to iron your seams open. Okay, so now these are the back pieces. Remember, notice that we didn't stitch down the center part as well. We only stitch down the side part. So I'm going to bring the side part of the front and one side of the back, just like you see me doing like this. And we're going to go ahead and pin it down like this. So you're basically pinning down the side of this corset. It's opened in the middle because we are going to be placing a busk, so don't forget. So this is what one side of the corset is looking like when you fold it in. So I'll head over to the sewing machine and I'll stitch down the side, and I'll go ahead and pin this other side as well, like this. So this is what it's looking like. You see a busk is going to be here to complete this, and then there'll be loops at the back to finish it up. So now I'll head over and stitch down the sides with the stitching allowance I gave as well. So guys, after stitching that down, I'm going to go ahead and make straight lines down on both sides of my stitching lines. I don't know if you guys understand. I'm going to make bony casings on both sides of my stitching lines like this. I'll do it for all the pieces. Now, the how wide your boning case is going to be depends on the bone you're going to be using. For this particular one, I'm going to be using the smallest one. So if you're using this bigger one, this is a bigger one, you are going to have to check it to be sure of how wide your stitch is going to be, okay? So I'm going to be making use of this smaller one like I said before. So I have to make sure that the bony casing I have for each of these allowances here is just enough for my bone to pass through. So on this side seam as well, I'll go ahead and iron the seams open and make boning casing. Then for this back, I'll just stitch a bony case on one side of the back pieces. So I'll go ahead and do that and show you guys what I have done here. So I don't know if you guys can see this clearly. You can see how I stitched down the bony casings for the back. I just did it one. Then for the front pieces, I had to do it on both sides of our stitching. So by the time you're done with your bony casing, you're going to have it looking like this. So guys, next thing I went ahead to do was to stitch down my lining pieces, just like I've done on the actual fabrics as well. And I've gone ahead to iron all my seams, but I ironed the seams towards one direction. You can see these ones are leaving towards this direction, and this other one towards the opposite direction as well. So these are the lining pieces, and you notice that the lining pieces do not need any boning casing because we are not going to be placing bones on the lining. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to align this top area here, and I'm just going to go ahead and pin it down. So I'm aligning the top of my corset, and I'm just going to pin it down. Mind you, this is just one part of the corset, okay? So I'll head over to the sewing machine now and I'll make a stitch at this top here, and I will do the same thing for the other side before we come and place our busk in the middle. So guys, after making that stitch, this is what we have. So as you can see, I'm just going ahead to cut off the excess allowances at the top here. And after that, I went ahead to make notches all the way around so that this will actually be very flexible to turn over to the right side. Okay, so go ahead and do the same thing. So after making the notches around, I'm just going to open this seam like this. I'll push the stitching allowance towards the lining, and I'm going to go ahead and make a top stitch. So go ahead and top stitch towards the lining. So guys, after making the top stitch, I went ahead to turn it to the right side and iron it out. And this is what it's looking like. You can see how nicely it's looking. So now we're going to work on the busk. Okay, we're going to be placing the busk. So now the busk actually comes in two parts. Okay, so there is the knob and there is the loop. So the loop part is going to be placed on the part of your dress that is the right side. So once you've gotten the part that is going to be going towards the right side when you wear it, that is the part you're going to be placing the loop. So as you can see, I've turned that part of my corset to the wrong side, and I'm going to be placing the loop on the inside. So from the top, I place this loop on the inside. So now I'm going to be marking all the areas where I'm going to be stitching down. So the areas with this thing here, let me just call it the eye, all these things coming out here, we are not going to be marking it, okay? So basically what I'm going to do is the space here, there is none here, I'll mark it. Let's use the blue marker. I'll mark it here, then leave the eye and then come down and mark it again where there was no eye. Leave the next eye, mark the area that doesn't have an eye. Leave the next eye and mark the area that doesn't have an eye. So all these spaces here where we have the eyes are not going to be stitched down, okay? So the only part I'm going to be stitching down is just these areas where I have my blue chalk marked, okay? So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to make stitches on these areas where I had my chalk. So these areas that doesn't have the chalk will not be stitched down. I am repeating it again. You want to make sure you back stitch by the time you are done stitching, making every stitch, because you need it to be very tight. So I'll go ahead and stitch it down and then come back to show you guys how to go about the other side. So after I was done stitching it down, you can see all the spaces that I left here. So I'll go ahead and cut off this excess allowance here because you don't need it. It might be in the way. Now I'll turn it over to the right side and then went ahead to iron it out. After I was done, now it's time to place the loop through the holes that we created earlier. So there are going to be holes there actually, but it might be a little bit hard for you to pass these loops through it. So you can see I turned everything over to the wrong side just to be able to pass the loops, the eyes if you choose to call it eyes, through the holes that we left earlier. Once you've passed it out through the holes, you're going to see it coming out like this. I think now you should understand what I was trying to explain earlier. So I'll just hold this area with my pin to make sure it doesn't move again while I push every other one out. Okay, so can you see what I have here? Now everything is looking nice and pretty and the whole loop is out. Okay, can you see? So now I'm going to head over to the sewing machine. If you have a zipper foot, this is the place that it will come to play because you really need it here. You're going to go over to the sewing machine and make a top stitch very close to this iron here just to secure it in place. So now this part is secured. Now we're going to work on this other side. So by the time we are done stitching this other side, we cannot easily fix our box like this and it come out nice. Okay, now for this side, what I'm going to do is to turn this piece over to the wrong side, and I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and make a straight stitch all the way down. You're not going to be leaving anything aside, just make a straight stitch. So I made that straight stitch, turn it over to the right side and iron it out like I always do. So now I'm going to be arranging the two pieces together like this to make sure that everything is of the same length. One is no longer than the other, and I'm going to be using my chalk to determine the places where we are going to be placing the other part of the corset. Okay, so as you can see, I'm arranging it again just the same way I'm doing it. Make sure to follow it like this. Place this other part on it like this, and you're going to mark all the spaces where we have our, I think let's call it a little knob. These things coming up here. So everywhere that you have it, you are going to make a mark there on your actual fabric. So you want to be very sure that it's exactly where you have it, because this is what will determine whether your busk is going to be staying straight or looking bent. So once you've made that mark, you want to place the busk on the inside of the fabric again. And then from the inside, you want to make sure that each point is exactly on the mark that you made on the outside. So you can see I'm confirming with what I have on the outside. Now I can remove this part from the inside, and I'm going to make very tiny holes on those points I just marked. So it's going to only be on the fabric. Make sure it doesn't go through to the lining. So I'm just cutting it only on the fabric itself. So a very tiny hole here. You can see I'm removing the lining. I'm just picking only the fabric and cutting a very tiny hole. So on all the points that I made, you're going to cut a very tiny hole. So you can see I placed this on the inside and brought it out through those holes, and it's actually coming out nice. So I continued with the holes, and then now we can place the knob on the inside like this. You can see I'm just passing each knob out through the hole that we created. Can you see what I'm doing here? So just pass it out through the hole that you created, and once you're done with everything, you're going to see how it comes out nicely. So if you created a hole in the place that is not in the right spot, it will actually give you issues. You realize that it's actually bent. You can see how everything is standing straight here. It means that we got this correctly. Okay, so now I'm going to go over now and make a stitch very close to this as well, just like we did on the other side. So this is what I had after making that stitch, and now we can perfectly place our busk, and you can see how nicely it is. So basically that's all for the fixing of the box. If you turn it over to the back, you can see how nicely it looks. So now we're going to be placing the eyelets for the lacing of the back. So the two back pieces, I'm just placing them, aligning everything together to make it very straight. I want to cut off any excesses. I just want everything to be straight here. So I'm just going to quickly cut off this area here to just make it straight. So now we'll turn this piece over to the wrong side again. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is to make a stitch down here and do the same thing for the other side. So guys, after making that stitch, this is what it looks like. Now I'll go ahead and make a bony case as well, just like I did on this other side, on this end here, and also on this other end as well. Go ahead and stitch down a bony case. So after stitching down the bony cases at the end of the corset at the back, this is what it looks like. Okay, so now if we turn it to the wrong side, you can see how nicely it's looking at the back as well. I know this is usually very tricky. You'll be wondering, what is she joining together? I always advise that you take it easy, take your time, and just try as much as possible to follow it and practice a couple of times, because one day you just actually get it and be like, is this it? So right now, as you can see, I'm just trimming off these excesses on these ends, because some were looking like they were longer than the others. So now I just trimmed everything to be the same length. Okay, so before we go ahead and place our bones through all the casings that we created, we need to place our eyelets on the back of this corset for us to be able to lace it up later. And our eyelet usually comes in two parts. There's the flat one, and then there's the bigger one that comes with the head. So we're going to be using the two of them. What I normally do for my eyelets is I'm going to be creating the spots where we're going to be placing them. So from the top of this back place here, I'll come down by 1/2 inch. Now from this 1/2 inch point, I'm going to be giving a gap of 1 inch before making a new point. So I'm marking 1 inch from each new point like this. So each point is 1 inch away from the other. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this for the both parts, and then come back and place the eyelet. So once you've made those marks, normally you should be able to create holes using your eyelet plier, but mine doesn't work. So I'm going to be creating my own manually using my scissors. So I'll fold this fabric into 4 like this. Just create a very tiny hole at that spot where I'm going to be placing the eyelets. So if it doesn't come out through the back, I create a very small hole at the back as well in the same spot. So now when I have a hole, I'm going to place the bigger part of my eyelets like this through the front, and then I'll take the slimmer one and I'm going to use it to cover it. So when you actually buy this, they are going to give you 2 types, so you understand what I mean by the bigger and the slimmer one. So once you've placed them like this, you're going to press it down with your eyelet plier, or if it's the one that has a hammer you're using, or the other green one, honestly don't know what that is called, the name for that, but it all does the same work. So I'm going to continue right now. I'll create holes, place the flat one, and then continue with this until I get to the end, and then do the same thing for the other side as well. So guys, I've gone ahead to do it for the both parts, and you can see I made sure to align them to make sure that one is not higher than the other, because that will give you issues as well. You want to always make sure that you are very precise when you're making whatever type of corset. So now we're going to be passing our boning through our casing finally. So now I'll just cut away from the edges, from the ends of your bone, and I'm going to use my file to just file it up to make it smooth. Some people bone it at this end. Whatever you want to use is totally fine. So I'm going to be passing this through the boning casing that I have. Now I'm going to be placing it in this direction like this, in this curve, not in this other direction like this, the way it comes. So I'll pass it through the hole like this that we created, the casing that we created, push it in, and they are going to shift it out a little bit by about 1/2 inch, so that you have some free space at the end for you to be able to stitch the end here. So I've done that, and you can see the direction that the bone is inside. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other side and every other casing that I have. So guys, after passing the boning through all the casing, it's actually going to look weird like this. So if you have something like this, it's totally normal because of the direction of the bone. So I'll just separate each of them, and I'll head over now and iron them out to make them come out straight. So you need to iron it properly for it to be straight. So after I was done ironing it out, this is what I have. My bones are still inside. All I did was to iron it out. So when you're working on corset, you must have a very good steam iron. So now to finish up the ends of this corset, I've gone ahead to cut out a piece like a bias to use and finish up these ends. Okay, so I'm just going to head over to the sewing machine and stitch this from the front side like this, stitch it down here, and do the same thing for the other side. So for this busk area, I won't be able to use my machine to stitch there, so I will not stitch it to that busk area. I will just stop it somewhere before the busk so that it doesn't break my needles. So after I was done making that stitch, you can see, like I said, the busk area, I left them here. I'll be finishing up this busk area with my needle and thread, so this way I'll be able to stitch only on the fabric without actually breaking my needle. So I'll finish it up with my needle and thread as you see me doing like this. So if your busk is too long, go ahead and do the same thing. Don't stitch on the busk with your sewing machine so that you don't destroy your machine, because the busk is very strong. I will do the same thing for the other piece. So now to finish up this, I would fold this side here in and fold it again, and then fold it up again like this. Okay, now on this busk area as well, you're going to be leaving it aside. Like I said before, don't stitch on the busk even for this other part. So for this now, I'm going ahead to fold this in and pin it down. So I'm going to pin it all the way to the end, and we'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch it down. So this is what it looks like after I was done pinning it down. I've not even stitched this down yet, and you can see how the pins are holding it in place. So now we'll go ahead and use the sewing machine and stitch this in place, and do the same thing for the other side. I'll be leaving the busk area as well. So after stitching it down, this is what I had. Now the busk area that the machine could not sew, I'm going to use my hand needle and thread to finish it up again, because you don't want to risk breaking your needle or destroying your sewing machine just because you are making one corset. Okay, so I'm going to just finish this up with my hand needle and thread, and that will basically be all for this tutorial. Honestly, that's basically all for this video. So I'll just go ahead and finish this up and show you guys what it looks like. So this is it basically. You can now lock up this area with your busk, and then for the back, I went ahead to just fold in a bias tape to use and lace it at the back, and you can see how nicely it looks at the back. So I'll be using this bias tape to lace it up, and this is how it looked on me after I was done making everything. So thank you so much for watching. I'll be seeing you in my next one. Bye.